जिंदगी में हर चीज के दो पहलू होते हैं बेटा।
The kettle began to hum before the room finished waking. Light sifted through the curtains in thin buttered ribbons, and the walls made the small sounds old houses make when they stretch wood sighing. Pipes clearing their throats, paint remembering its age. I stood at the sink with my palms on the cool enamel and watched a single lemon seed circle the drain like it was memorizing a goodbye. My wrists are still good. My hearing, too, and patience well. Patience has always been my secret inheritance, the kind that doesn't earn interest until you need it like breath. That morning, I was 76 and stubborn, aproned and barefoot, thinking of nothing worse than whether the tomatoes would split in heat if the afternoon turned mean. The floor was freshly mopped. The radio muttered a sermon to no one in particular, and then the room tilted, not with drama but with the quiet persistence of a rug being tugged. I reached for the counter and met air. There was a shape of light in the window. The neighbor's geraniums like red punctuation. The lemon seed paused, the hum changed pitch, and I fell. When I opened my eyes, there was a damp rag on my forehead and Mrs. Ellis from next door, fanning me with a church program that had a peeling sticker of a lamb. Her perfume was lily sweet, almost medicinal. You scared me, Mama Ruth. She said everyone calls me that, even those I never birthed. The ambulance boys were already in my freckled kitchen, careful, polite, their belts dragging keychains like wind chimes. They strapped me into straps as if tying a boat that floats in its sleep. Dehydration, the doctor said later, and I liked the crispness of the word, like overbaked cake, like rain that went elsewhere. They kept me overnight to make the machines less nervous, then sent me back to my little house with a pamphlet on water and common sense. He arrived the next morning with a bouquet that would outlive a flood, fake peonies, a fake bow, the color of toothpaste. His smile was the one he used on clients, and I suppose I should be grateful he considered me one. Ma, he said, setting down a folder with corners sharper than his kindness, we need to talk about safety. His name is Daniel, but when he was small, he called himself Dandel. The tongue couldn't catch the eye and I kept it, pressed it in the family book with his school photos and first lost tooth. He smelled faintly of aftershave and hurry. He spoke of falls and statistics, of what ifs who can stack like boards across a river. You were lucky this time, he said, as if luck and motherhood were cousins at a cookout. I watched his mouth while he talked, the way his lips pressed together before numbers. The way he looked past me when he said future, like it lived in the corner behind the television. I said little, because I was already doing the arithmetic on the space between us, what we once spoke without speaking, how far that had drifted without waving. He returned 2 days later, carrying a man who smiled with his gums. The man had a tie the color of mustard and a name that was slippery, something like Mr. Hale or Mr. Hall. They sat me at my own table, and Daniel placed a pen like a spoon in my hand. It's just in case, he said, temporary. You keep your independence, Mom. I just helped steer, water wings. I could have said no, don't think I don't know that. I could have told him to take that plastic bouquet and his mustard-tied friend and his voice that had learned to talk over women, and let the screen door be my verdict. But this is my son, my boy, who once came home with pockets full of white stones only because they looked like the moon and he wanted me to have something celestial. He was the child whose mittens never kept up with winter, whose ears turned red when he'd done something he didn't understand how to name. You make allowances. You stretch yourself between what is and what you remember. So I signed my name in its Sunday dress, curls tidy, the way I learned from nuns and bills. And this is how it begins, not with a bang, but with a page and a son who will call you Mom, as if the word were an apology. Days were still days. I watered the tomatoes and I baked biscuits the way my mother taught me. Second of 8, hands always busy with dough and daughters. I kept my purse on its hook and my list clipped to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cow who forgot how to be a cow. I was okay being watched a little. I have always liked being the one doing the watching, but I can allow the opposite now and then. Age doesn't scare me. Being forgotten does. The first signal was small. In the grocery aisle, with flour in my hair, like an accidental crown, my card refused me. The little screen said no in a language even babies understand. I tried it again because sometimes machines are like men who need repetition wrapped in patience. No, I used the emergency card I keep in a sleeve behind a photo of my husband holding a fish he never could have caught if lies weren't useful. It went through, but I felt a thread in my belly pull. I called Daniel from the parking lot, the sun prying at my scalp. Don't worry, he
जिंदगी
said,
में
just consolidating.
हर
Mom,
चीज के
you don't
दो
have to
पहलू
worry about
होते
all
हैं,
that anymore.
बेटा।
There it was. That phrase like a shut door. You
जिंदगी
don't have
में
to. You don't. He
हर
was good at
चीज के
appearing the
दो
way male
पहलू होते
appears,
हैं,
when he wanted and as
बेटा।
if invited. Paperless, he said when the statements
जिंदगी
stopped.
में
Efficient, he
हर
said when my
चीज
name
के
shifted
दो
like an
पहलू
appliance
होते
on
हैं,
rollers. He took my
बेटा।
debit card so it wouldn't get lost and offered me a monthly
जिंदगी
allowance
में
on a card that looked like a
हर
gift
चीज
certificate
के
to a
दो
store where
पहलू
nothing
होते हैं,
fits. $150, announced like a prize. I was
जिंदगी
supposed to
में
clap. I think I
हर
laughed.
चीज
Just
के
once.
दो
The
पहलू
kind
होते
that
हैं,
feels like tripping in an
बेटा।
empty room. There is a special humiliation in having your
जिंदगी
own
में
roof explain
हर
itself to you by
चीज
your
के दो
child.
पहलू
He walked
होते
through
हैं,
my rooms,
बेटा।
nodding as if the chairs were his. As if the piano that has
जिंदगी
known my
में
fingers longer than he's
हर
known income
चीज के
belonged in a
दो
brochure.
पहलू
We
होते
could
हैं,
get you into something
बेटा।
cozy, he said, closer to care. Care,
जिंदगी
as if
में
love needed a middleman,
हर
as if the
चीज
home my
के
knees
दो
know in the
पहलू
dark
होते हैं,
were a hazard instead of a
बेटा।
shelter. His wife, Lena, arrived with
जिंदगी
smiles
में
that dripped and hardened.
हर
It's all
चीज के
love,
दो
she said,
पहलू होते
touching
हैं,
my shoulder as if petting a
बेटा।
wary cat. We only want what's best.
जिंदगी
She used to
में
borrow earrings without
हर
asking when they were
चीज के
dating,
दो पहलू
returning them in
होते हैं,
Ziplocs that smelled like
बेटा।
citrus. I liked her then, or liked who she let me
जिंदगी
be around
में
her, a mother-in-law, who
हर
baked and
चीज
held her
के
tongue
दो
and loved the
पहलू
man
होते
she
हैं,
claimed to love.
बेटा।
I began to write. I took an old ledger and tucked it between
जिंदगी
recipes
में
for things I never make
हर
anymore.
चीज के
Dates,
दो
times.
पहलू होते
Who
हैं,
called? What changed
बेटा।
without asking? The notebook grew heavy with ink.
जिंदगी
It
में
comforted me how paper
हर
keeps
चीज
fidelity.
के
It
दो
does not
पहलू होते
gaslight.
हैं,
It does not say
बेटा।
you're misremembering. It does not replace your name with
जिंदगी
oversight.
में
You can't unteach a
हर
math teacher the
चीज
habit
के
of
दो
proof.
पहलू होते
When I
हैं,
was 30, I
बेटा।
ran my house like a ship. You don't get to 76
जिंदगी
and
में
unlearn wind. I called my
हर
sisters
चीज के
bueno,
दो
not a
पहलू
boy.
होते हैं,
A man now with a
बेटा।
jaw he got from our side of the family, and a jet black head of
जिंदगी
hair,
में
even time respects.
हर
His name
चीज
is
के दो
Leon, and
पहलू
since he
होते
was
हैं,
small, he has
बेटा।
always liked fastening things, latches, puzzles,
जिंदगी में
causes. He works with
हर
computers in a way
चीज
that
के
makes my
दो
eyes
पहलू
swim.
होते
He
हैं,
picked up on the third
बेटा।
ring and used the voice he uses for emergencies and good
जिंदगी
news.
में
I'm on my way, Aunt
हर
Ruth,
चीज
he
के
said.
दो
He
पहलू
didn't ask
होते हैं,
why. Faith is a kind of
बेटा।
furniture you inherit if you're lucky. He came with a
जिंदगी
laptop that
में
glowed like an aquarium.
हर
He made
चीज
tea
के
the way
दो
his mother
पहलू
does,
होते हैं,
too strong and sweet
बेटा।
enough to peel the lining from your jaw. Show me, he
जिंदगी
said.
में
I showed him the ledger.
हर
He ran
चीज
his
के
fingers
दो
over my
पहलू
sloppy
होते हैं,
numbers as if they were
बेटा।
braille. He whistled low. You've been tracking all this.
जिंदगी
Of
में
course, I said.
हर
If it isn't
चीज
written,
के
it
दो
isn't ready
पहलू
for
होते
court.
हैं,
Who said
बेटा।
anything about court? I did, just now. He
जिंदगी
loved me
में
more for that. I could
हर
tell.
चीज
He
के
logged
दो
into
पहलू
places
होते
I
हैं,
wasn't invited anymore.
बेटा।
Passwords had been changed to new languages. He
जिंदगी
pressed
में
buttons and used words like
हर
trace and
चीज के
flag.
दो पहलू
I
होते
stood at the
हैं,
sink, washing a
बेटा।
plate that was already clean, because there are times you
जिंदगी
require the
में
theater of domesticity
हर
to
चीज
keep
के
from
दो
climbing into
पहलू
the engine
होते
of
हैं,
trouble and pulling hard.
बेटा।
When he turned the screen, my name was missing from
जिंदगी
things I had
में
embroidered with my life.
हर
There were
चीज
accounts
के
I
दो
didn't
पहलू
recognize,
होते हैं,
closed with the kind of
बेटा।
efficiency white shirts wear like cologne. Money had sprouted
जिंदगी
legs
में
and walked toward something
हर
called
चीज
Birchfield
के दो
Assets,
पहलू होते
which has
हैं,
the gentle ring of a
बेटा।
doctor's office and the appetite of a wolf. Don't let the
जिंदगी
pastoral
में
names fool you.
हर
Wolves often
चीज
wear
के दो
ferns.
पहलू
How
होते
much?
हैं,
I asked him,
बेटा।
and the room split between who I had been and who I must
जिंदगी
become.
में
He told me. The number
हर
was
चीज
simple,
के दो
like a neck
पहलू
snapped
होते हैं,
clean. Not
बेटा।
enormous in the way movies like, but mighty in the way robbery at a
जिंदगी में
stoplight is mighty. It takes
हर
your breath
चीज
because
के
you know
दो
how many
पहलू
days you
होते हैं,
traded for those dollars.
बेटा।
They carry the smell of classrooms and the sweaty sigh of
जिंदगी
children in
में
June and the groan of an old
हर
car
चीज
insisting
के
on
दो
its
पहलू
relevance.
होते हैं,
No more calls to
बेटा।
Daniel. Leon said, gather and wait.
जिंदगी में
How much? I asked
हर
him,
चीज
and the
के
room
दो
split between
पहलू
who I
होते
had
हैं,
been and who I must
बेटा।
become. He told me. The number was simple,
जिंदगी
like a
में
neck snapped clean.
हर
Not enormous
चीज
in the
के
way
दो
movies
पहलू
like,
होते
but
हैं,
mighty in the way
बेटा।
robbery at a stoplight is mighty. It takes your breath because you
जिंदगी
know how
में
many days you traded for
हर
those
चीज
dollars.
के
They
दो
carry the
पहलू
smell
होते
of
हैं,
classrooms and the
बेटा।
sweaty sigh of children in June and the groan of an old car
जिंदगी
insisting
में
on its relevance. No
हर
more calls
चीज
to
के
Daniel.
दो पहलू
Leon
होते हैं,
said, gather and
बेटा।
wait. I wore my old patience like a shawl. I
जिंदगी
said
में
nothing. I didn't have to.
हर
If this
चीज
were a
के
dance,
दो
let
पहलू
him
होते
lead.
हैं,
I recorded what
बेटा।
needed recording on a little phone Leon slid me.
जिंदगी
The
में
kind that wouldn't survive a washing
हर
machine
चीज
but
के
which could
दो
keep a
पहलू
secret as
होते
well
हैं,
as any ant. I
बेटा।
practiced smiling for the kind of sentences that arrive coated
जिंदगी
in
में
benevolence and stick to the throat
हर
like
चीज
syrup.
के
We're
दो
safeguarding
पहलू
your
होते हैं,
future, he would say.
बेटा।
And I would nod and tuck the words into the place where anger
जिंदगी
makes
में
winter. He called my house the
चीज
asset.
के दो
He called
पहलू
my
होते
shade
हैं।
trees overgrowth.
बेटा,
He called my bills burdens and my savings liquid.
जिंदगी
He
में
used we a lot. It is a
हर
small
चीज
word with
के
big
दो
teeth when
पहलू
it thinks
होते
it
हैं।
speaks for you.
बेटा,
If you have never toured a place that calls itself a community,
जिंदगी में
let me be your shoes. They
हर
took me on a
चीज के
Saturday,
दो पहलू
smiling like
होते हैं।
ushers, Lena
बेटा,
holding my elbow as if I were a pitcher that might chip. The
जिंदगी
walls were
में
earth tones. The staff
हर
wore cheerful
चीज के
sneakers.
दो
The
पहलू
windows
होते
were
हैं।
wide. Men and
बेटा,
women rested in chairs that held their weight as if weight were something
जिंदगी
to be
में
apologized for. The
हर
air smelled
चीज
of
के
bleach and
दो
banana
पहलू
pudding.
होते
On the
हैं।
calendar in the
बेटा,
lobby, craft hour, hymn sing, blood pressure
जिंदगी
checks,
में
bingo. I shook
हर
hands with a
चीज
woman
के
named
दो
Lottie who
पहलू
had eyes
होते
like
हैं।
polished marbles
बेटा,
and asked me 3 times if I liked blue. I told her yes
जिंदगी
each
में
time. She squeezed my
हर
hand as
चीज
if
के
pumping a
दो
well.
पहलू होते
The nurse,
हैं।
though I'm not sure
बेटा,
nurse is the right word, anymore had a laugh that made me
जिंदगी
think of
में
spoons hitting glasses.
हर
We
चीज
like to
के
keep
दो
everyone
पहलू
engaged,
होते हैं।
she said,
बेटा,
nodding at a man asleep in a wheelchair facing the television.
जिंदगी
He snored
में
like a gentle bear.
हर
There is
चीज
nothing
के
wrong with
दो
care
पहलू
when
होते
care is
हैं।
asked for.
बेटा,
There is something wrong with care delivered as a rearrangement of
जिंदगी
ownership.
में
This is lovely,
हर
I
चीज
said,
के
and
दो
Lena
पहलू
glowed.
होते
We
हैं।
can change the lease on the
बेटा,
house faster than you think, she told Daniel,
जिंदगी
not
में
bothering to lower her voice.
हर
We should do
चीज
it
के
while the
दो
market is
पहलू
this
होते
silly.
हैं।
I smiled
बेटा,
into the salad that came with our tour lunch. I tried to
जिंदगी
identify
में
the greens, but they were an
हर
optimistic
चीज
kind
के
I've
दो
never seen
पहलू
grow
होते
in any
हैं।
real dirt.
बेटा,
The next week, I walked into a lawyer's office that smelled
जिंदगी
of
में
paper and spines. Her
हर
name was
चीज
Ms.
के दो
Caldwell,
पहलू
a
होते
woman
हैं।
whose hair surprised no
बेटा,
one and whose pen had the weight of someone, whose seen
जिंदगी में
signatures used as weapons and
हर
bandages.
चीज
I
के
liked
दो
her office
पहलू
books,
होते हैं।
plants that had to be
बेटा,
watered by hand. She listened as if her ears had hands
जिंदगी
too,
में
catching my words
हर
and filing
चीज
them
के
where they
दो
wouldn't get
पहलू
bent.
होते हैं।
We don't confront,
बेटा,
she said when I was done. We tether. We file.
जिंदगी
We
में
make the land solid again
हर
under your
चीज
feet so
के
when they
दो
jump,
पहलू
they
होते
land
हैं।
on their own trap.
बेटा,
She explained things that made me both tired and
जिंदगी
awake.
में
Trusts with locks inside
हर
locks.
चीज के
Injunctions
दो
that
पहलू
turn
होते
lions
हैं।
into cats. Power
बेटा,
of attorney with teeth and temporary clauses tied to
जिंदगी
language.
में
Like weather changeable
हर
and often
चीज के
misreported.
दो पहलू
I
होते
left with a
हैं।
packet heavier than the
बेटा,
peony bouquet. On the way home, the clouds were the
जिंदगी
color of
में
dishwater. The trees
हर
stood with their
चीज
arms
के
out as
दो
if waiting
पहलू
for a
होते हैं।
word. I pressed my hand
बेटा,
to the window and said it to myself. Mine, my
जिंदगी
floor,
में
my ceiling, my
हर
name,
चीज
mine.
के दो
If this
पहलू
were a
होते
story
हैं।
that wanted to be a fairy
बेटा,
tale, there would be a single clever trick and a tidy parade
जिंदगी
of
में
apologies. But life is an
हर चीज
unspooling,
के
not a
दो
knot.
पहलू
What
होते
came
हैं।
next was weeks of
बेटा,
pretending to be less alert than I am. Of cooking
जिंदगी
meals for
में
people who think a grandmother's
हर
care is
चीज
currency
के
you can
दो
spend on
पहलू
betrayal
होते
and
हैं।
get change.
बेटा,
Lena complimented my cobbler and asked if the china was
जिंदगी
insured in a
में
way that sounded like she
हर
practiced it in a
चीज
mirror.
के दो
Daniel
पहलू
left budget
होते हैं।
summaries with color coding,
बेटा,
like stoplights on my table. When he said we, I
जिंदगी
said
में
When he said
हर
moving,
चीज
I
के
said my
दो
back will
पहलू
like that.
होते हैं।
When he said
बेटा,
sign, I turned on the little red eye in my pocket and held out a
जिंदगी
pen
में
as if it were my own.
हर चीज
Patience
के
is not
दो
passive.
पहलू होते
Patience
हैं।
sharpens a knife.
बेटा,
If you have never listened to your child plot a future
जिंदगी
that sells
में
your past, it is a
हर
sound you
चीज
cannot
के
unhear.
दो
I learned that
पहलू
he had
होते
met a
हैं।
realtor who liked to
बेटा,
say, gorgeous bones and grandmother chic, who saw
जिंदगी
the creak
में
in my staircase as
हर
bonus,
चीज
charm
के
and the
दो
crack in the
पहलू
picture
होते
window
हैं।
as opportunity
बेटा,
for an open concept. Learned that my signature
जिंदगी
had
में
walked onto documents without me,
हर
the way
चीज
a
के
drunk
दो
will believe
पहलू
he can
होते
dance
हैं।
on water. I
बेटा,
learned the names of accounts I did not remember pronouncing. I
जिंदगी
learned that the
में
distance between concern
हर
and control
चीज
is
के
an inch
दो
that becomes
पहलू
a mile
होते
while
हैं।
you're sleeping.
बेटा,
There is one thing old age gives you that youth mistakes for
जिंदगी
softness.
में
You know how to wait while
हर
holding your
चीज
breath
के
without
दो
turning
पहलू
blue.
होते
We
हैं।
chose Thanksgiving as
बेटा,
our stage. I do not bake for enemies. I
जिंदगी
baked anyway.
में
Not for them, never for
हर
them, but
चीज
for the
के दो
table,
पहलू होते
which
हैं।
deserves a full belly.
बेटा,
And for the ghosts of my parents who taught me that
जिंदगी में
hospitality is not an
हर
endorsement so much
चीज
as a
के
mirror.
दो
Come
पहलू
sit.
होते हैं।
See yourselves.
बेटा,
Take what you brought. The house worked with me.
जिंदगी
My table
में
is oak, with scars that
हर
remember
चीज के
birthdays
दो
and
पहलू
spilled
होते
gravy.
हैं।
The good plates
बेटा,
clink like a language only families speak. The oven did its
जिंदगी
part,
में
humming its old hymn of
हर
heat.
चीज
I
के
lit 2
दो
candles
पहलू
that had
होते
been
हैं।
waiting for a celebration
बेटा,
I couldn't name. I wore a cardigan, the color of washed
जिंदगी
bones
में
and pearl earrings that
हर
belonged to my
चीज के
grandmother.
दो पहलू
The
होते
woman who
हैं।
taught me that the right
बेटा,
accessory is a straight back. They came late. Of
जिंदगी
course they
में
came late. Daniel with a
हर
store-bought
चीज के
cheesecake
दो
in a
पहलू
box that
होते हैं।
pretended it was richer than it
बेटा,
is. Lena with a scarf too loud for November and
जिंदगी
cheeks that
में
looked painted on. They
हर
brought to
चीज
couples
के
I
दो
didn't know
पहलू
because
होते हैं।
arrogance loves an audience.
बेटा,
They toured the house as if it were a rental,
जिंदगी
running
में
fingers along the banister like
हर
appraisers,
चीज के दो
complimenting the
पहलू
square
होते हैं।
footage the way one
बेटा,
compliments a body. It intends to leave. We ate with the
जिंदगी
manners
में
my mother would haunt me for
हर
forgetting.
चीज
We
के
ate
दो
and let the
पहलू
tiny
होते हैं।
theater play itself.
बेटा,
Daniel stood with his glass the way men do in magazines
जिंदगी
and made
में
the speech of a man who thinks he
हर
is both
चीज
captain
के
and
दो
country.
पहलू होते
Change,
हैं।
he said,
बेटा,
as if the word were a virtue by itself. Protection,
जिंदगी में
fresh starts. He
हर
spoke the
चीज के
vocabulary of
दो
money,
पहलू
now
होते हैं।
fluent, forgetting that
बेटा,
I taught him his first word. I remember it was light,
जिंदगी
pointing
में
at a lamp he thought was the
हर
sun. Come
चीज के
inside for
दो
tea.
पहलू होते हैं।
Lovely, I said when he
बेटा,
finished. I waited for the quiet to settle, so even the
जिंदगी
spoon
में
understood it. I have
हर
my own
चीज के
updates.
दो
The
पहलू
room
होते
folded
हैं।
around me like a curtain.
बेटा,
Lena's smile tightened. Strangers built their
जिंदगी
faces into
में
neutral. I set my
हर
napkin
चीज
down as
के
if
दो
laying a
पहलू
card in a
होते
game
हैं।
we were both done
बेटा,
pretending wasn't being played. I've already made
जिंदगी
arrangements,
में
I said. My voice,
हर
the way my
चीज के
father's
दो
used to be
पहलू
when he
होते
told a
हैं।
truth that would pull a
बेटा,
thorn. The house isn't yours to consider. It is
जिंदगी
protected,
में
as am I. The financial
हर चीज
rearrangement that
के
happened
दो
without me
पहलू
has been
होते हैं।
undone. The temporary
बेटा,
papers signed during a medical blip have been
जिंदगी
reconsidered by a
में
court that likes
हर
rules more than
चीज
it
के
likes
दो
stories.
पहलू होते
The
हैं।
front door opened.
बेटा,
On cue, and Ms. Caldwell walked in like a sentence you wish
जिंदगी में
you'd said during the argument,
हर
but which
चीज
arrived
के
right
दो
on time.
पहलू
She
होते
laid
हैं।
papers down that
बेटा,
thudded. Lena went white like flour. Daniel went the
जिंदगी
color of
में
undercooked meat. The
हर
strangers
चीज
looked at
के
their
दो
plates as a
पहलू
turkey
होते
might
हैं।
offer witness protection.
बेटा,
You forged my name, I said, on a
जिंदगी
document
में
bearing my house and my
हर
breath.
चीज
You
के
moved
दो
money that
पहलू
smelled like
होते
my
हैं।
mornings and my chalk
बेटा,
dust and your father's overtime and called it streamlining.
जिंदगी में
I felt no tremor in my
हर
hands,
चीज
and I am
के
grateful
दो
to them
पहलू
still.
होते हैं।
You told me I didn't need
बेटा,
to worry, but worry is an old friend of old women,
जिंदगी
and she
में
keeps us alert. I
हर
worried
चीज के
correctly,
दो
son.
पहलू होते हैं।
He tried to say my
बेटा,
memory was tattered. Ms. Caldwell raised one
जिंदगी
eyebrow,
में
which is a verb in her
हर
language.
चीज के
Leon pressed
दो
a button
पहलू
on his
होते हैं।
phone, and my own living
बेटा,
room echoed with earlier Daniel's. The ones that
जिंदगी
forgot
में
microphones can be confidants
हर
with better
चीज
ethics
के
than
दो
men.
पहलू
The word
होते हैं।
asset shone like a light
बेटा,
you forget to turn off. You'll be hearing from the court,
जिंदगी
Miss
में
Caldwell told him,
हर
and his mouth
चीज के
opened,
दो
and nothing
पहलू
came,
होते हैं।
which is the most
बेटा,
honest thing his mouth has done in months. Here is the part
जिंदगी
where I would
में
like to tell you I wept.
हर
It would be
चीज के दो
satisfying.
पहलू
The way
होते
rain
हैं।
on a roof comforts
बेटा,
people who still believe weather is about them. But I
जिंदगी
didn't.
में
I poured coffee and cut
हर
pie and
चीज के
sent people
दो
home with
पहलू होते
Tupperware
हैं।
because the refrigerator
बेटा,
should not have to keep that amount of sorrow alone.
जिंदगी
When the
में
door closed and the house
हर
returned to
चीज के
itself,
दो
Leon
पहलू
and I
होते
sat
हैं।
in the quiet that follows
बेटा,
something loud. He kissed my temple, and I let
जिंदगी
him. There are
में
mouths you are grateful to
हर
have share your
चीज के
skin.
दो पहलू
The
होते हैं।
courtroom later was cold in the
बेटा,
way. Only buildings with flags know how to be. The
जिंदगी
judge
में
had hair like a crown and
हर
eyes that had
चीज
seen
के
too
दो
much and
पहलू
were still
होते हैं।
generous with their seeing.
बेटा,
Ms. Caldwell spoke. And words behaved for
जिंदगी
her.
में
Daniel tried to tell his
हर
version of the
चीज
fairy
के
tale
दो
where
पहलू
monsters
होते
call
हैं।
themselves shepherds.
बेटा,
And the judge put her hand up without a word, and his story
जिंदगी
froze
में
like a pond in late
हर
January.
चीज के
I will
दो
not make a
पहलू
circus
होते
of that
हैं।
day. It is
बेटा,
enough to say paper is an honest witness and recordings have better
जिंदगी में
memories than any of us.
हर
And
चीज
some
के
rooms have been
दो
built to
पहलू
love
होते
order
हैं।
more than they love tears.
बेटा,
The judge untied what had been knotted. The money
जिंदगी
walked back
में
with interest like a dog
हर
who realized
चीज
which
के
hand
दो
fed it.
पहलू
The
होते
power
हैं।
of who was in charge
बेटा,
returned to my lap, where it had warmed itself for decades
जिंदगी
without
में
needing to be named.
हर
It is a
चीज
strange
के
thing to
दो
get your
पहलू
name back.
होते हैं।
It is like finding a
बेटा,
dress you loved at 19, fearing it won't fit,
जिंदगी में
and slipping in to discover your
हर
bones
चीज
never
के
forgot
दो पहलू
themselves.
होते
I
हैं।
walked out of that building
बेटा,
taller than I've been in years, and breathed air that didn't feel
जिंदगी
borrowed.
में
We went to the bank, me and
हर
Ms.
चीज
Caldwell,
के दो
who I now
पहलू
call
होते
Hazel
हैं।
because names that share
बेटा,
coffee can share informality. And the young
जिंदगी
manager
में
looked at me as if I'd climbed out of a
हर
painting
चीज
and
के
demanded
दो
the right
पहलू
century.
होते हैं।
We didn't know,
बेटा,
he said, and I wanted to tell him that ignorance is often
जिंदगी
the most
में
comfortable chair in any
हर
lobby.
चीज के
Instead,
दो
I
पहलू
smiled the
होते हैं।
smile of women who know
बेटा,
every system is easier to forgive than to fix. You do
जिंदगी
now,
में
I said. There is
हर
an
चीज
after.
के
It
दो
doesn't
पहलू
glitter.
होते
It
हैं।
doesn't apologize for
बेटा,
being an after. It is stacks of envelopes with my name
जिंदगी
right
में
side up. It is a garden
हर
again,
चीज
not as
के दो
extravagant
पहलू
as
होते
before,
हैं।
but loud enough for
बेटा,
bees. It is keys in a bowl by the door and
जिंदगी
passwords that
में
live only in my head and on a
हर
single
चीज
paper.
के दो
Ms.
पहलू
Caldwell
होते
keeps
हैं।
in a lock that
बेटा,
requires her face and mine to open. It is 3 phone calls to
जिंदगी
women
में
I've known since before we had
हर
hips,
चीज
the
के
kind
दो
of friends who
पहलू
say I
होते
brought
हैं।
gumbo instead of I
बेटा,
told you so. As for Daniel, Life
जिंदगी
introduced him
में
to consequences, the
हर
way a stern
चीज
ant
के दो
introduces you to
पहलू
soap.
होते हैं।
His job didn't enjoy
बेटा,
the smell of scandal, sat on their doormat, and perhaps
जिंदगी
they
में
loved their door more than they loved
हर
him.
चीज
Lena
के दो
posted
पहलू
photographs
होते
without
हैं।
him, and then fewer
बेटा,
photographs, and then photographs of sunsets,
जिंदगी
as if the
में
world itself had replaced the
हर
man.
चीज
I
के
do not
दो
keep track.
पहलू होते
I am
हैं।
not a ledger for other
बेटा,
people's repentance. People ask if I miss him,
जिंदगी
and I don't
में
lie. I miss the boy
हर
who learned to
चीज के
whistle
दो
under our very
पहलू
roof,
होते हैं।
who put toy
बेटा,
cars under the sofa and cried when they disappeared into the
जिंदगी
city of
में
dust. I miss the boy
हर
who once
चीज
threw up
के
on my
दो
shoes
पहलू
and then
होते
cried
हैं।
harder than his stomach
बेटा,
because he thought he had ruined my favorite pair. I
जिंदगी
miss what he
में
was before someone taught him
हर
that power
चीज
feels
के
like
दो
love if you
पहलू
close your
होते हैं।
eyes and press hard enough,
बेटा,
that someone might be the world. It might be success.
जिंदगी में
It might be a mirror,
हर
but I will not
चीज
let the
के
world
दो
hand me
पहलू
back the
होते
bill
हैं।
for lessons I never
बेटा,
ordered. I took a portion of what was returned to me and
जिंदगी
planted
में
it. Where money
हर
learns to grow
चीज के
gentle.
दो
A
पहलू
scholarship,
होते
no,
हैं।
not a memorial.
बेटा,
He is not dead. He is simply elsewhere. A
जिंदगी
beginning in my
में
herald's name because he
हर
was the sort of
चीज के
man who
दो
could teach a
पहलू
broom to
होते
waltz
हैं।
and tell a bill it would be
बेटा,
paid on a Friday. And keep his word even when
जिंदगी
Friday
में
didn't come. The fund is for
हर
first
चीज के दो
generation,
पहलू
first in
होते
a
हैं।
family to believe the
बेटा,
library belongs to them, first in a line that will go
जिंदगी
further because
में
someone ahead of them
हर
had hands
चीज
strong
के
enough to
दो
pass a
पहलू
torch
होते
and
हैं।
delicate enough not to crush
बेटा,
it. Sundays belong to Leon and his little girl,
जिंदगी में
Myra, who thinks every bird
हर
is a
चीज
messenger
के
and
दो
every cloud
पहलू
wants to
होते
be a
हैं।
dragon if someone
बेटा,
just asks nicely. We sit on the back steps with the old
जिंदगी
quilt that I
में
refuse to retire.
हर
We
चीज
eat
के
muffins that
दो
are
पहलू
always too
होते
blue
हैं।
with berry. He gives
बेटा,
me updates on the scholarship in a voice that makes me think of
जिंदगी
summer
में
warm and undeserved and
हर
fully
चीज
mine.
के
I
दो
learned to
पहलू
say new
होते हैं।
names, right? I
बेटा,
write them on index cards and tuck them into prayer.
जिंदगी
There
में
came a day in March when a car I
हर
didn't
चीज के
recognize
दो
pulled into my
पहलू
short
होते हैं।
driveway. With its
बेटा,
polite pothole, he got out. Lost weight will make a
जिंदगी
face look
में
honest, but I have learned
हर
that's a trick
चीज
of
के
lighting.
दो
He
पहलू
stood on a
होते हैं।
porch, 2 inches from the
बेटा,
porch I used for 20 years, but it felt further than
जिंदगी
the moon.
में
Mom, he
हर
said.
चीज
The
के
words
दो
sounded like an
पहलू होते
apologies
हैं।
whisper. I stepped
बेटा,
outside and closed the door behind me because boundary is a
जिंदगी
form of
में
love. We give
हर
ourselves when
चीज
others
के
have
दो
forgotten
पहलू
how.
होते हैं।
We sat. He said the
बेटा,
things men say when they've learned that consequences are less
जिंदगी में
flexible than promises.
हर
He didn't
चीज
ask for
के
money.
दो
I
पहलू
would
होते
almost have
हैं।
forgiven him for
बेटा,
asking. He asked for a listen, and I gave it because grace
जिंदगी
is a
में
coat I can afford. He
हर
said he was
चीज के
scared.
दो
He
पहलू
said
होते
control
हैं।
as if it were a lifeboat
बेटा,
and not an anchor. He said he had tried to be a better
जिंदगी
man by
में
acting like a larger one.
हर
I
चीज
looked
के
at his
दो
hands.
पहलू
I
होते हैं।
recognized the way they
बेटा,
moved. They are my father's hands. Another life and those
जिंदगी
hands
में
would have built me a porch swing
हर
or
चीज
repaired the
के
sag
दो
in my
पहलू
bedroom
होते
window.
हैं।
You betrayed
बेटा,
me. I said gently because truth does not require
जिंदगी
volume.
में
You put your name in my mouth
हर
and called
चीज
it
के
care.
दो
You took
पहलू
what I
होते
worked
हैं।
for and rearranged it
बेटा,
into a story where I was a character without lines.
जिंदगी
I
में
know, he said, which is
हर
not the same
चीज
as I'm
के
sorry.
दो पहलू होते
Then
हैं।
know this too, I
बेटा,
said. I love the boy you were. I cannot steward the man you
जिंदगी
chose to
में
become. His
हर
eyes searched my
चीज के
face for the
दो
soft
पहलू
door I
होते
used to
हैं।
open even when the
बेटा,
weather warned me against it. You are my son, I said,
जिंदगी में
but my legacy is mine
हर
again.
चीज के
The wind
दो
toyed with
पहलू
the
होते
chime
हैं।
mirror made me out of
बेटा,
spoons. It sounded like laughter from another room. I
जिंदगी
went
में
inside. He remained.
हर
He will
चीज
find
के
his
दो
way or he
पहलू
will learn
होते
to
हैं।
sit in the dark, he
बेटा,
authored. That is not my sentence to write anymore.
जिंदगी
This is the
में
part people rarely ask
हर
about,
चीज
the
के
quiet
दो
after
पहलू
justice.
होते हैं।
It is a quiet that
बेटा,
doesn't need to be earned daily. It simply asks to be
जिंदगी
noticed.
में
Morning is a cup and a
हर
chair by
चीज
the
के
window that
दो
remembers
पहलू
how my
होते हैं।
husband used to cough
बेटा,
before laughing. Afternoon is a book I underline because I
जिंदगी
want the
में
words to know they were seen.
हर
Evening
चीज
is a
के
walk
दो
through the small
पहलू
garden
होते
where
हैं।
the tomatoes have
बेटा,
learned, once again, the shape of patience. My knees
जिंदगी
are not
में
what they were. Neither is
हर
my heart.
चीज के
Both
दो
work if I
पहलू
coax them
होते हैं।
at night, before
बेटा,
I fold myself into sheets that smell faintly of sunlight and
जिंदगी में
detergent. I open the little
हर
journal
चीज
Leon
के
bought
दो
me blue
पहलू
cover,
होते हैं।
edges already soft
बेटा,
from being loved. I write small things I never would have
जिंदगी
recorded
में
when life was busy with big
हर
important
चीज
chaos.
के दो पहलू
The way my
होते हैं।
neighbor's boy waved at me with
बेटा,
2 hands. The sound of a train that is always
जिंदगी
pretending
में
it doesn't miss station stops.
हर
The way
चीज
my
के
own
दो
name looks
पहलू
in the middle
होते
of a
हैं।
sentence when I write it in
बेटा,
cursive. Ruth, like a river bending back to
जिंदगी
greet
में
itself. I do not write
हर
about the
चीज
court.
के
I
दो
do not
पहलू
write about
होते हैं।
forged names.
बेटा,
I do not write about money that went on a walkabout and staggered
जिंदगी
home,
में
ashamed. Those have
हर
become the
चीज
bones of
के
the
दो
story,
पहलू
and
होते
bones
हैं।
are meant to support,
बेटा,
not to be carried in your pocket to show strangers.
जिंदगी
Some
में
nights I dream the house the
हर
way it used to
चीज
be
के
Daniel
दो
Small
पहलू
again,
होते
running
हैं।
down the hall with
बेटा,
hair wet from a bath, water flinging from his ears like
जिंदगी
commas,
में
light, night, he says, pointing at the lamp. I turn it on for him. Every time, the room fills and he claps and claps, as if a switch could make day. I wake with tears sometimes. I let them dry where they fall. Sorrow doesn't always need a handkerchief. It needs a place to sit and a glass of water, and this is the heart of what I know, pressed between pages so the future can tell it by scent if it forgets the words. You are not disposable. Just because time has laid a gentle snow on you, you are not a problem for someone else to solve with a spreadsheet and a cheerful brochure. You are a room full of stories that are not for sale. You are the keeper of recipes no one wrote down. You are the witness who can tell the difference between love that limits and love that lifts. You are the one who remembers where the important papers are. And when you forget, you are still the one who decides who learns to look. If someone tells you that you're safer without your own name, watch their hands. If someone calls your life an asset, lock up your silver and your voice. If someone says you don't have to worry anymore, worry a little. Then call a woman with a pen and a nephew with a machine and friends who cook without measuring. Lay your papers out like a feast. Sign your name with steadiness. Patience sharpens a knife. And when it is over and they step into their own shadow, don't cheer, don't gloat, take your morning back. Sit by a window, eat a peach. Plant something with a small root and an unreasonable optimism. One afternoon, in late summer, clouds gathering themselves for a lecture, Mira asked me why the wind sounded different on some days. Because it's passing through different leaves, I said, and every tree speaks its own language. She nodded like a person who plans to remember that when she is old. What do your leaves say? She asked, and I laughed. The good kind that shakes dust out of corners. They say I am still here, I told her. They say I belong to myself. When evening comes now, the neighborhood lights up in pieces. Patient little constellations that never once asked the sky's permission. I can hear a game from somewhere down the block. The thud of a ball, a child yelling in triumph or protest. I turn off the lamp and let the house find its night voice. Out back, the tomatoes glow dull red. Midnight lanterns with secrets. I stand at the sink and press my palms to the enamel that has kept me company over so many breakfasts. And I watch a lemon seed circle the drain again, not going anywhere, not leaving or arriving. Just a small pale moon keeping time in a universe I can hold. I am not a lesson. I am not a warning. I am the story that kept breathing even when someone tried to write an ending they hadn't earned. If you listen closely, you can hear it in the quiet between the kettle's hum and the sound the house makes when it knows. You've come home, the soft, stubborn, holy insistence of a name spoken by the only person who needs to say it, mine. The winter after everything unraveled, I taught myself to walk a little slower, not because my bones demanded it, but because the light in December likes to turn corners without warning and I didn't want to miss it. There is a cheap wisdom people hand to the elderly like a paper cup. Slow down. Take it easy. Be careful. I take care. Yes, but not the kind that locks a person in a padded room. My care is the kind that notices the old dog 3 houses down has learned to dream louder, that the mailman wears different boots on Tuesdays, that the girl at the market hums one song when her mother packs her lunch and another when her father does. I tuck these tiny proofs into my pockets like lemon drops. They make the day sweeter when bitterness tries to sneak in. Sometimes, when the wind comes straight down the street like it's on assignment, I walk past the place Daniel wanted for Mitha, one with the cheerful sneakers and the walls that seem to be trying too hard. I don't go inside. I stand by the hedges and listen to the voices trapped in that big painted throat of a building. Someone is laughing, not happy laughing, but performing. Someone else is arguing with a television. A nurse, or a person wearing a nurse's scrubs, pushes a cart that squeaks in the key of apology. I bless them like a good witch and keep walking. I'm not here to punish myself with what might have been. I am here to remind the air that it never learned my name. On a day that war reigned like a veil, I took a bus to the courthouse where the orders were filed and corrected and set like bones, not to gloat, not even to remember. Exactly. I wanted to see the building when it wasn't busy with my life. Buildings live lives, too, if you pay attention. The marble steps glistened like old soap. The flag was wet and heavier than usual, tired of pretending it's always willing to wave. I sat on a bench across the street and ate an apple that tasted like school in October. People went in as if the doors were teeth afraid of the bite, resigned to it. Grateful for the chewing when the law works the way it promises to. I whispered a thank you to the bricks, which have heard so many names pronounced wrong and then pronounced right. And I walked home by a longer way on purpose. Leon calls every Thursday night after Mira is asleep. He whispers, though he doesn't have to. He tells me
जिंदगी
stories
में
about his work that I pretend to
हर
understand.
चीज के
I
दो
imagine his
पहलू होते
keyboard is
हैं,
a small stubborn
बेटा।
piano and he is coaxing music out of it that only other
जिंदगी
machines can
में
dance to. We talk about the
हर चीज
scholarship
के
and the
दो
girl who wrote
पहलू
us a
होते
letter
हैं,
that felt like a map.
बेटा।
Each paragraph a road that led to a small lit
जिंदगी
house
में
called determination. We
हर
talk about a
चीज
boy
के
who
दो
cried when he
पहलू
read his
होते हैं,
award because he had
बेटा।
never been chosen for anything that didn't require running
जिंदगी
fast.
में
Leon reads their names
हर
aloud and
चीज के
I
दो
write them on a
पहलू
page
होते
in the
हैं,
blue journal that has
बेटा।
grown soft around the edges like an old hymn book. When the
जिंदगी
list is
में
long enough, I imagine
हर
their names,
चीज के
stepping
दो
out of my
पहलू
kitchen,
होते हैं,
tying their shoes,
बेटा।
and turning toward futures that haven't learned to be afraid of
जिंदगी
them in
में
late January. The
हर
sky took on
चीज
that
के
old
दो
dishwater
पहलू
color
होते
again
हैं,
and I made soup
बेटा।
because there are days. The body needs to be reminded
जिंदगी
that warmth
में
exists, while the
हर
carrot
चीज
softened
के
and the
दो
potatoes
पहलू
yielded to
होते हैं,
time. I pulled the
बेटा।
cookie tin from the pantry, the one with the needle and thread, and the
जिंदगी
4
में
buttons that have outlived 3
हर
coats.
चीज के
Taped
दो
to the
पहलू
inside of the
होते
lid
हैं,
is the photograph I
बेटा।
don't let myself look at often. Daniel on the porch
जिंदगी
steps,
में
thin legs and shorts,
हर
the
चीज
band-aid
के
on his
दो
kneecap
पहलू
like a
होते
sticker of
हैं,
courage. He
बेटा।
holds a paper boat as solemnly as if it's a country.
जिंदगी
His hair
में
is a crown of cowlicks
हर
and lightning.
चीज के
His
दो
eyes are a
पहलू
street I
होते
used to
हैं,
know by heart.
बेटा।
Where did you go? I asked the tin. Because I am an old
जिंदगी
woman
में
and old women are
हर
allowed this
चीज
mercy.
के
The
दो
soup
पहलू
hummed.
होते हैं,
The house answered in the
बेटा।
language of pipes. The photograph said nothing, as
जिंदगी
photographs
में
are loyal enough not to
हर
argue.
चीज
I
के
didn't
दो
cry.
पहलू होते
Tears do
हैं,
a job when there's a
बेटा।
fire. They don't have to commute every day. I closed the
जिंदगी
tin
में
and put it back and stirred the
हर
pot until
चीज
it
के
told me
दो
it was ready.
पहलू होते हैं,
Asterisk, I took a
बेटा।
bowl across town to Ms. Caldwell, who had worked through her
जिंदगी
lunch
में
again because some women
हर
make a
चीज
religion
के
of
दो
competence
पहलू
and
होते
forget
हैं,
their own mouths need
बेटा।
tending. She smiled in the doorway of the office that
जिंदगी
still smelled
में
of paper and spines
हर
and
चीज
justice.
के दो
And she
पहलू
let
होते
me in
हैं,
like I was delivering
बेटा।
sacrament. We ate with our spoons and our eyebrows and
जिंदगी
told each
में
other small stories about the
हर
way the
चीज
world
के दो
insists on
पहलू
being the
होते
world.
हैं,
I told her about the
बेटा।
bus driver who renamed a stop water tower +1
जिंदगी में
because the old sign had
हर
fallen down
चीज
and
के
nobody
दो
remembered who
पहलू
was
होते
supposed to
हैं,
fix it. She told
बेटा।
me about a client who dyed her hair purple to convince herself she
जिंदगी
was
में
brave and then discovered she
हर
was brave
चीज
with
के
or without a
दो पहलू
crown.
होते हैं,
You left a door open for
बेटा।
that boy. She said gently, not looking at
जिंदगी
me,
में
looking instead at the window
हर
where a tree
चीज
wrote
के
winter
दो
against
पहलू
glass
होते
with
हैं,
thin, patient
बेटा।
branches. It's a door without a handle on his side, but
जिंदगी
it is
में
open. I know,
हर
I said,
चीज के
because
दो
bitterness
पहलू
is a
होते
cheap
हैं,
coat and I can afford
बेटा।
better. In February, the city held its breath like it was
जिंदगी
trying to
में
pass a test. Snow
हर
flirted and
चीज
left.
के दो
Rain danced
पहलू
and
होते
retreated.
हैं,
Children wore
बेटा।
hats and then didn't. I kept the kettle busy because
जिंदगी
the
में
sound of water reaching itself
हर चीज
keeps
के
away
दो
the kind of
पहलू होते
silence
हैं,
that tries to rearrange
बेटा।
thoughts. On a Tuesday, a woman I recognized from
जिंदगी
the
में
neighborhood knocked on my door
हर
with a
चीज
petition
के
about a
दो
stop
पहलू
sign and
होते
left
हैं,
with a slice of
बेटा।
pound cake wrapped in wax paper, and a gossip about the
जिंदगी
Anderson
में
boys' new band that
हर
practices in
चीज
the
के
garage
दो
and
पहलू
sounds like
होते
2
हैं,
dishwashers arguing.
बेटा।
On a Thursday, a package arrived with no return
जिंदगी
address.
में
Inside, a
हर
book on
चीज
birds
के
and a
दो
note that read
पहलू होते
simply,
हैं,
for Mira.
बेटा।
The handwriting was careful, ashamed of its desire to be
जिंदगी
seen.
में
I sat at the table and
हर
looked at the
चीज
paper
के
as if
दो
it might
पहलू
sprout a
होते हैं,
face. It didn't,
बेटा।
of course. I put the book aside and gave it to Myra
जिंदगी
on
में
Sunday, and we sat on the
हर
back steps
चीज
and
के
learned the
दो
names of
पहलू
wings.
होते हैं,
I took a bowl
बेटा।
across town to Ms. Caldwell, who had worked through her lunch
जिंदगी
again because
में
some women make a
हर
religion of
चीज के
competence
दो
and
पहलू
forget their
होते
own
हैं,
mouths need tending.
बेटा।
She smiled in the doorway of the office that still smelled
जिंदगी
of paper
में
and spines and
हर
justice.
चीज के
And
दो
she let me
पहलू
in like I
होते
was
हैं,
delivering sacrament.
बेटा।
We ate with our spoons and our eyebrows and told each
जिंदगी
other small
में
stories about the way the
हर
world
चीज
insists
के
on
दो
being the
पहलू
world.
होते
I
हैं,
told her about the bus
बेटा।
driver who renamed a stop water tower +1
जिंदगी
because the
में
old sign had fallen down
हर
and nobody
चीज के
remembered who
दो
was supposed to
पहलू
fix
होते
it.
हैं,
She told me about a
बेटा।
client who dyed her hair purple to convince herself she was
जिंदगी
brave
में
and then discovered she was brave
हर
with or
चीज
without a
के
crown.
दो पहलू
You
होते
left a
हैं,
door open for that
बेटा।
boy. She said gently, not looking at me,
जिंदगी
looking
में
instead at the window where a tree
हर
wrote winter
चीज के
against
दो
glass with
पहलू
thin,
होते हैं,
patient branches.
बेटा।
It's a door without a handle on his side, but it is
जिंदगी
open.
में
I know, I
हर
said,
चीज
because
के
bitterness
दो
is a cheap
पहलू
coat
होते
and I
हैं,
can afford better.
बेटा।
In February, the city held its breath like it was trying to pass a
जिंदगी में
test. Snow flirted and
हर
left.
चीज
Rain
के
danced
दो
and
पहलू
retreated.
होते हैं,
Children wore hats and then
बेटा।
didn't. I kept the kettle busy because the sound of
जिंदगी
water
में
reaching itself
हर
keeps
चीज
away the
के
kind
दो
of
पहलू
silence that
होते
tries
हैं,
to rearrange thoughts.
बेटा।
On a Tuesday, a woman I recognized from the
जिंदगी
neighborhood
में
knocked on my door with a
हर
petition about a
चीज के
stop
दो
sign and left
पहलू
with a
होते
slice
हैं,
of pound cake
बेटा।
wrapped in wax paper, and a gossip about the Anderson
जिंदगी
boys' new
में
band that Practices in the garage and sounds like two dishwashers arguing. On a Thursday, a package arrived with no return address. Inside, a book on birds and a note that read simply, for Mira. The handwriting was careful, ashamed of its desire to be seen. I sat at the table and looked at the paper as if it might sprout a face. It didn't, of course. I put the book aside and gave it to Myra on Sunday, and we sat on the back steps and learned the names of wings. She asked me how birds decide where to go. By knowing where they are, I said, and she laughed like she knew I'd meant something else. 2. Children understand metaphor better than adults. Perhaps because they haven't built a house out of the literal and refused to leave it in early spring. When the first green dared and the ground pretended it had always been generous, I met a woman named Evelyn at the market. She was holding 3 cabbages as if offering them to a god and frowning at none of them. I don't know which one wants to be soup, she said to no one. They all look like decisions I don't want to make. I told her the leftmost had the shoulders of a leader. She laughed and chose it and then invited me for tea because sometimes the world gets it exactly right without effort. She lived alone with a couch that had learned to forgive and a mantle covered in seashells, named after places she had never visited. We became the kind of friends who exchange weather reports with the urgency of opera and leave notes in each other's mailboxes that read, "Take the good umbrella," when the forecast forgets its manners. She is teaching me to knit. I am teaching her to cuss without blasphemy. We are both improving. The house is quiet now. The kind of quiet that hums rather than hides. My tea cools beside me, and the wind tells its small, faithful stories through the cracks of the porch rail. I used to think freedom came in grand gestures, courtrooms, signatures, verdicts, but freedom, I've learned, is smaller than that. It's the sound of your own key in your own door. It's a breath you don't owe anyone. It's a name that belongs only to your mouth. I have no empire, no riches to parade. Just my garden, my ledger, my peace, and that's enough. What was stolen has been returned. But what mattered most was never money. It was the quiet strength to stand, the dignity to speak, and the mercy to stop explaining. People say age softens you, maybe, but it also sharpens the truth. You see clearer when you've watched enough sunrises to know what light costs. I don't hate my son. Hate is a leash, too. I simply let him go where he chose to walk away from the woman who raised him to be better. And that's its own kind of forgiveness. So if you ever find yourself at a table where love feels like a cage, remember this old woman's voice. You can be kind and still say no. You can be gentle and still guard your name. You can lose everything people counted for you and still keep the one thing that counts. Yourself. And as the night folds itself around my little house, I whisper it once more, not to the past, not to revenge, but to the quiet that earned me back. I am here, I am whole, and I am mine.